In this lesson, I want to talk about how to work with curves. They're a completely different object type from what we've seen so far, but can be incredibly powerful for modeling. So first, let's look at a curve. I'll delete my default cube, hit Shift-A, and go down to Curve, and let's just choose Bezier. Then I'll hit Tab to go into Edit mode, and if I go to Top View, you'll see that curve consists of 2 points, and each of those points has handles. So I can move the points themselves around, but then I can also rotate them. If you've worked in a vector application like Illustrator, or even just used curves in Photoshop, you'll probably be really familiar with this type of working. But what's great about curves in Blender is not only can we manipulate them in 3D space, but we can also use our familiar commands. For example, I can just hit E and extrude, G to grab, R to rotate, and S to scale. As you can imagine, curves are really good for making strands and smooth, thin shapes. It's just so much easier to create certain shapes with curves than with vertices. To give you an example of some of the most important functions when it comes to curves, let's go ahead and move this one down here, and then let's go to Curve and toggle Cyclic. This command, or you can use the hotkey Alt-C, will just connect it into a circle or leave it separated at the ends. Another important thing to know is that curves have a direction as well, and we can see this if we go to the Curve Edit Mode overlays and turn on normals. If we want to switch the direction of this particular curve segment, then we can go to Segments and switch direction. So curved objects can have multiple segments inside of them. If I select all of these, I can just hit Shift-D and copy this over, and now I'm working with multiple segments, and they can be going in different directions. There are also different types of curves. They all have these control points, but we can use different algorithms to interpolate between them. When I was in object mode, I added a Bezier curve, and so this is a Bezier type curve, but we can also go to Curve, Set Spline Type, and choose between Poly, Bezier, and NURBS. If we choose Poly, then it's going to look a lot more like just vertices and edges, and in fact, that's basically what we're transforming here. We just get to have the properties of a curve object, but for the most part, this isn't going to be super useful. We can also go to Curve, Set Spline Type, and NURBS, and this will treat control points more like boundaries on a cage than points to pass through. For the most part, though, we want to use Bezier, so I'll go back to Curve, Set Spline Type, and choose Bezier. In the future, we'll even have more types of curves that we can choose between. But another important point is that not only can we have different types of curves, we can also have different types of handles for our control points. To switch the type of handle, just select a control point, go to the Control Points menu, and choose Set Handle Type. You can also get this menu in the right-click context menu, or just by pressing V. By default, the Bezier handles are aligned handles. That just means that the right and left handles always create a straight line. When you move around one, it'll move around the other. This is best for creating nice, smooth curves. We can see the effect of this better if I have more than a couple handles. So I'll go ahead and just hit E and extrude some of these out. And now let's take a look at the other types of handles. I'll hit V, and first I'll switch to Automatic. That'll make it a yellow handle, and then if I hit G and move this around, then it automatically adjusts itself to make the smoothest possible curve. However, if I hit R to rotate or S to scale, then it'll switch back to an aligned handle because it assumes that we want to manually customize it. But if we choose Automatic and we only hit G to grab and not R or S to rotate or scale, it can do most of the work for us. Another type of handle that does a lot of work for us is the vector handle. This one creates a sharp point right at the control point, and it always points the handles towards the next control points. So I can move this around, and it'll always retain that sharp angle. If I select one of these handles and start moving it around, then it'll switch it out from a vector type handle to a free type handle, which just means that we can put either one, the left or the right, wherever we want. So really, the main two handle types are just free and aligned, and that's why there's a toggle between them. The vector and automatic handle types are just there to make things easier if you don't want to do as much manual tweaking. A couple other cool things to know is that you can draw curves really easily by using the Draw tool over in the toolbar. Let's just select that, and then I can draw any shape on my screen and it'll turn into a curve. And if you'd like a more Illustrator-like experience, you can switch over to the Curve Pen tool, and then just click once to place a vector handle, and then click and drag to create a smooth aligned handle. This is one of my favorite tools because it allows us to make shapes incredibly quickly. Though for me, I usually never get it on the first try, so it takes a bunch of tweaking afterwards. But the beauty of curves is that that's very easy. Another thing to know about curves is that they have a resolution. If we tab into object mode and zoom in really close, you can see that this is comprised of a bunch of different segments. If we want to increase or decrease the resolution, then we can just go to the curve properties in the properties editor and change the resolution preview. We can lower that or increase it. If the render U is set to 0, then the render resolution is going to be the same as the preview resolution. If you switch the curve to a two-dimensional curve, then it can't have any height along its local z-axis, but then you can also fill it in. I usually use Grease Pencil for stuff like that now, but you can do it with curves. Usually though, I use a 3D curve. You can give any curve thickness down in the geometry options. First, you could change the extrude value, which is going to extrude the curve along its tangent. If we go into edit mode, we can see the normals are heading in that direction, and the tangent is essentially just opposite of the normals. So if we wanted this to be a solid line going horizontally, like lying flat on the floor, then we just need to take all of these and rotate the curve such that the tangent is pointing outwards. So we can do that either with the tilt tool over in the toolbar. You can just click and drag here. Or we can go to control points and tilt, or use the hotkey Control T. You can see here that it doesn't like all shapes, but that's how you do it. You can also change the thickness of this extrude per point by going to the radius tool in the toolbar, or by using the hotkey Alt-S. So just select some points, Alt-S, or Control-T to tilt. If you want your objects to be rounded rather than flat, then instead of doing an extrude, we can also do a bevel. Here I'll increase the depth, and right now it's only doing it on one side because our fill mode I set to half earlier. So I'll set it back to the default of full, and now we have nice thick curves, which are really easy to use for all sorts of chords and tubes. If I select a part of my curve and hit Alt-C to toggle cyclic, then you'll see that we can also fill caps. There's a lot we can do here, from setting a custom object as the profile, or freeform drawing our own profile here in the profile option. So curves in Blender are fairly powerful for modeling all sorts of snake-like things, but there's also one other really important use, and that's for modifying meshes. So I'll go ahead and just delete that test curve, Shift-A, curve, and this time I'll choose path, which is just a different type of curve. We can move these control points, and the curve smoothly blends between them. Sometimes I find this one a little bit easier to use. It's mostly up to you. But what I want to do here is take a straight object and bend it along this curve. So I'll hit Shift-A. Let's go down to Mesh, and I'll add an icosphere. Then I'll make this a string of icospheres by going to the modifiers, Add Modifier, Generate, and Array. Now if I increase the count, I have a bunch of them all lined up, and let's say I wanted to array them along this curve. Well, then I can add modifier, deform, and choose curve. Then I can choose this curve object as the object for that curve, and now I can edit my curve, and the objects follow along. This is really, really nice. Now, one of the things that people get confused with the most when it comes to using the curve modifier is that the origins have to be in the same place in order for this to make sense. If I move one away from the other, then things start to get distorted. Or if I take my curve and let's say I rotate it differently, or it's way off axis, things start to get really weird really quick. So if you're ever in doubt, just make sure that both of the object origins for both the object you want to array as well as the curve are in the exact same spot. Also, make sure that their local orientations line up. If one of them is rotated, then the other one should be as well. So if we rotate them both at the same time, that works just fine. A good way to ensure this always happens is to, let's just go to wireframe view and parent the mesh object to the curve. I'll hit Control P, set parent to object, and now this is really easy to edit. A couple handy options when it comes to arraying along a curve specifically is that we can set the fit type from fixed count to fit curve. And then we can also use that curve as the object. And now we can go ahead and just extrude to our heart's content. And we'll automatically get icospheres to follow all the way along. You'll notice that at extreme angles, this doesn't work super well as it actually tries to bend the geometry itself. And there's times where that's really helpful and times where it's not. If you really want to tweak the behavior of the curve modifier, then it might be better to use geometry nodes, but that's a much bigger topic for another day, and you can watch my course Assemble if you want to get into that. For now, just know that we can use curves to make all different sorts of strings and strands and chords and snakes, that you can change the curve type by going to Curve and Set Spline Type, that you can hit V and change the handle type so that you can transition between smooth and sharp handles. And if things are ever looking weird with the curve modifier, that you just need to make sure that both of the origins are in the same place and that they're oriented in the same direction. I'm sure we could talk for an entire course on just curves, but that's the basics that you'll need to know for this course and how to use them for the most common use cases. I think you'll find them kind of fun and extremely helpful when you add them to your modeling toolbox.